Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
It really is one of the most important things you can do for yourself to help yourself feel better, perform better in life, just feel fulfilled. And it's something that so many of us let go, or we don't even realize it. I'm talking about self-care and self-soothing. Now, the self-care part took me too long to figure that out, but I started doing it. Self-soothing, I've never heard that, but she has, and she's going to talk about it today. She's a certified Reiki practitioner, a master Reiki practitioner. Annie Baker Atwood is back on the program with us. How are you?
I'm doing well. I love this topic.
Me too. It's been so long since I feel like we've gotten together. It's been a couple of weeks.
It has.
It's because I've been self-caring. Website, by the way, redbootsreiki.com. So let's define both of those. And I can't wait to get to self-soothing. I have an idea of what it is, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. So we have our energy centers, our chakras, and they kind of do different things, and they're different colors, which we just talked about. Mm-hmm. So your sacral chakra is the one that I say I use all my senses. Your root chakra is I'm fully present. And so if that gets disrupted, that's going to show up in, all your little colors in your aura. But I use all my senses, and we have 5 senses in our physical. And so self-soothe is about your physical, okay? And using your extra energy to support your physical. So the way that I look at it is self-care is so important. And those are things that we do every day. We plan them out. Eating, hydration, sleeping, journaling, being able to relate to others. Those are all really super important things about self-care. And Reiki's part of it. Definitely come on over if you need a little boost of self-care. But self-soothe is when you get dysregulated in a moment. So an example is you're going to somebody's house that maybe you don't know really well for a holiday party. This is a very, very common one. And when you have a very tuned in energy system, everybody else's energy feels like it's pouncing on you. And so it can feel really overwhelming. So when you get overwhelmed, the way to get yourself back regulated, one of them is to self-soothe in the moment. And some people think of self-soothe as kind of overeating or over drinking. A way of numbing out is kind of the low road of self-soothing. And I'm here to talk about really healthy ways you can self-soothe just to re-regulate, because it gets really, it can feel overwhelming when everybody else's energy is on high alert. And especially if it is kind of a yearly type of event where there needs to be a rapid exchange of information. And some of it feels pretty invasive. What are you doing with your life now?
Yeah. You
You
anticipate those people and those questions, or you do it to yourself. You might think they're judging me.
Yes.
I was doing this before. Now life changed. I'm doing this, and they're looking at me.
Yeah. And so when you do feel judged, which is probably very, very likely in a holiday season, mm-hmm. especially if they're multi-generational events, because certain, ages feel that they have a right to ask really impertinent questions. I would always get it from, the grandparents or my friends' parents. They had no boundaries when it came to questions.
Right. Yep.
And I felt very judged. So your throat chakra, you can just put your hand on your throat and say, I speak kindly to myself and others, which is a great phrase. And you can also put your hand on your heart and in your head or out loud, I choose joy. And when you choose joy, you are entering this conversation with an equality. So you don't feel superior and you don't feel inferior. You are simply answering a question, kind of face value, not with what you've read into it as, feelings, because emotions, an event has no emotions. It's how you perceive the event and attach the emotions to it that makes something become a trigger. So, it might be as simple as, oh, how are your classes at school? Maybe you're in college. How are your classes going? And the question is asking, are you intrigued with school? Are you enjoying it? Are you interacting with it? But what can get perceived is, oh my gosh, you're not the smart one in the family. Everybody else has better grades than you. And you just go down this path in a heartbeat. And then you kind of like snarl at the person. They're fine. And this poor person was really just curious what classes you were taking.
So now are you saying it's on you? That person that somebody asked that question of, and now you're thinking, wait a minute, yeah, you're in my mind, you're telling me that I'm not achieving what I should be achieving?
Right. And that's your mind.
Yeah.
And so and holiday time is an excellent time to kind of keep track of when you do get triggered, because often it's not people you see every week or daily. And so you're just not quite used to their energy, and they can ask questions, but you can say, wow. I mean, not right then and there, but reflecting after you self-soothe on that really felt like a trigger to me. I wonder what was up with that. And when you can approach it from kind of a curiosity point, it's a lot easier to tease out. And the example I use in real life was when they redid the church basement. They had one of those long tables so that they could lay out coffee hour. And the electricity didn't quite get it right. So you could only plug in 2 appliances. You could either plug in coffee and decaf, but if you tried to plug in a 3rd appliance for hot water, it tripped everything, simply because it hadn't been wired properly. And nobody was going to go back and rewire it. So everybody just worked around it. When you can look at when you're getting triggered as, oh, this is an overload, and it really wasn't done on purpose. For the most part, it's not done on purpose. Sometimes it is, but for the most part, it's not done on purpose. You think, wow, where was the wiring faulty? Where is that sitting with me? And my advice is, first, self-soothe to re-regulate, and just make a note of it as, there's some wiring that I need to run and figure out, and see where an emotion got attached to a situation that I can dissolve. And you can dissolve it. It is the coolest thing.
I'm listening. How do we do it?
Yeah.
It just happened. What do we do?
If it just happened, the first thing I usually do is either pretend I need to blow my nose and then wash my hands. because I am a very touch-oriented girl. And so these are all really socially acceptable things. You're like, oh, excuse me, my nose is running. I can't possibly answer that question right now. I'll be back. So that's one way to delicately avoid, or, oh gosh, that I need to check on that plant. If you happen to have any balsam, which is likely, around up in New England around holiday season, or rosemary or geranium, those scents, the smells that if you just rub them, those help you regulate. And it just brings you back down through your senses into I am fully present. Because if you're reacting and it's not a trauma-based attack.
It's just what you said, an emotion.
Yep,
Something you attach it.
Then if you can drop back down into your root chakra, I'm fully present, then that flips the switch back on so that you can say, oh, okay, yeah, let's take it at face value. And I would also recommend, most of us know our triggers. Most of us know our triggers because they've happened before. And so if you can know, oh yeah, that's going to trigger me, and kind of write out a canned response, it works really, really well. So Sue,
explain a canned response. What do you mean?
So for the one that comes to mind, and I'm not even understanding why it's coming to mind, as a family, we chose to co-sleep. And that was our choice. It worked for us as a family, but it was heavily challenged as something that shouldn't be done. And occasionally it would come up. Oh, don't you know that? And they wanted to give me information. And I would smile and say, it works for us. Isn't that great? And it circumvented a lot. Okay. Another one that comes up is, well, it did, 30 years ago, whether your child went to daycare or you were a stay-at-home mom. I chose to be at work, and my daycare provider was my co-parent and still to this day an amazing friend. And I would get, well, aren't you sad somebody else is raising your child? And I would say, I am so lucky to have another parent involved. She is a huge support to us as a family. And those were my go-to phrases. So in the back of my head, I might be thinking, what do you mean? Why is it bad that I'm going to work? You're not going to say that to some guy, are you, who's a father? But having just a measured response just helps.
If you like you said, if you know those triggers, then you've already got it in your head. Yeah, if somebody says something, I know what I'm going to say, and it's like autopilot. Okay, just I fended that off of the past. Now on to the next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and clearly I didn't feel any emotion around my boys being in daycare. Didn't feel any emotions around it, but I could also understand they did. And I'm going to give you one more example, and this took a lot longer to get over. My father used to say, when are you going to be married again? And I took that just completely as an attack. It's like, what do you mean? You don't think I'm a grown-up? You don't think I can handle things? Kind of flew off the high end there. And what he really meant was, I love you and I want to make sure you're okay. And so when I could answer I love where I live. I love what I do. And I am a very happy person. He was able to say, oh, Lovey, that's great. But it took a little while to understand that he wasn't criticizing me. It was his way of saying, I love you and I care about you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the times when someone is saying, I love you and I care about you, it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah.
So
It's how
that's
they
another.
verbalize it. And I guess if we all think of it, I mean, I have a 14-year-old daughter. I've said that I love you and I care about you a lot, but then there's other times maybe I've said something, school related, friend related, whatever it might be, and it could be taken another way. Like, I was checking up on me. Oh, what is it? No, don't
Yeah,
mean it that way at all.
right. Yeah. And it's, again, it can feel so sick in your stomach
Mm,
when you perceive that someone is challenging you. And your stomach is, I trust my gut.
yeah.
And that's often one that gets activated, especially through conversation, because your gut isn't reacting the same way to what they're saying and their intention. And so again,
Right.
that's one where you're going to want to self-soothe in the moment to re-regulate, and then just make a note of, I wonder where that's coming from. I wonder why I felt so challenged about that and where that wiring is.
What about, Annie, if it's a situation of disappointment? Let's say it's not necessarily somebody else saying something that you take the wrong way, but let's say, I had plans Friday night and so excited, going to be with this person, whatever it might be. And then they cancel. And then you're just like, oh, really? Now you're like, what am I going to do? That,
Yeah.
something like that. How do
Yeah.
you self-soothe yourself in a situation like that?
That is a really good question. And I personally have a list of treats that
Taco Bell.
I,
Taco
yeah.
Bell.
Wow. It might be, a new book that I've been saving. It might be a new kind of bubble bath and candle,
Something to look forward to.
something to look forward to. And that I wouldn't necessarily have time for. But now look at all that time that just opened up. What an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to watch that movie that you wanted to watch by yourself.
Yep.
To dive into a project that you didn't think you were going to have time for. And when you can flip it to what a blessing this opportunity of time is, it can, and I'm not saying that you're not disappointed. I think one of the things is, oh, we shouldn't feel, we should always flip it so it's a positive. And I disagree with that. I think you acknowledge, wow, I feel really blown off. And that makes me feel less of a person because it makes me feel disrespected.
But it's on them. You always have to look at it that way. They're not canceling or changing
Yes.
usually because of you. Situations
Yes.
happen. It's deflating, a little depressing. Just, you had plans, you look forward to it. But I see what you're saying. See the opportunity in it. Now look forward to doing something you might not have a chance to do.
Yeah. And sometimes it used to come up for me when I would have, say, weekend sailing plans,
Mm-hmm.
and then the regatta would get canceled or something would change. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have 2 whole days at home in a city. And I really wanted to go see this museum and I really wanted to go try this restaurant. And all of a sudden, something opened up. And usually it's exactly when you need it.
Hmm.
And sleep is a really, really good option. Even if you don't actually sleep, climbing in bed under all the covers with all your fluffy pillows around is one of the best self-soothe activities ever.
You just said something, Annie, I think is very powerful. Usually it happens when you need it. And we don't ever look at it that way. We look at it as a negative when situations arise or change. And it's just like, really? And you throw yourself a little pity party and whatever it might be. But I'm a firm believer, and things happen for a reason. So maybe that changed so you can get maybe some self-soothing time, some self-care, or you don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 hours. Maybe somebody else, hey, I'm free. You want to get to, we haven't hung out in forever. Instead of worrying about it, just go with it.
Yeah. And we tend as a society to overbook ourselves a lot.
Yeah.
And so if you find yourself even with, 90 minutes because someone couldn't meet you for coffee, sometimes it feels panicky. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
I'm, if I just sit here, people will think I am not being productive. And I'm like, just sit and people watch.
Oh, heck yeah.
It's
Do
it
you want
is
you want
an
me to tell you
amazing.
you want me to tell you what I did this morning?
Yeah.
A rarity. Never happens. Had some things change this morning, slept a little bit later, and I was going to the gym and my car is being repaired. I'll make this short. Didn't have my headphones. And I'm like, I can't work out without I got it. That's me. I'm into music. I don't want to hear what they have. So I called up a friend. I knew she was home. I'm like, what kind of coffee you like? I'm going to bring it over. She's like, no, you're not. I don't even have makeup on. I'm coming over. We go over there, and for like an hour, we sat and drank coffee and watched The Price is Right. It's
Yes.
like this was so much fun. And she just texted me. I know I resisted that, but that was actually a lot of fun. I'm like, yeah, it was just random. Like we're trying to guess the prices, Plinko and a whole deal. So you never know what's going to happen. Just go with
Right.
it. Yeah.
Right. And be okay with that uncertainty.
Yeah.
Um, and the reasons for self-soothing is when you're not okay with the uncertainty or you feel challenged, whether that's from an event or from somebody saying something. But if it's an event and all of a sudden you have this opportunity and you can really say, yeah, I was looking forward to that. And what else is going to come down the pike?
Mm-hmm.
That feels really great. If you aren't able to turn on the dime, as they say, pivot, it does get stuck.
Do you
And
notice that when we're in those situations? I mean, you're an energy reader and healer. Do you sense that energy in somebody else? Let's say, we were talking, this happened, whatever. Do you pick up on that from somebody else?
yes,
Mm.
yes, I can actually feel and see the energy just hitting a wall and deregulating the person more.
Wow.
And honestly, I was that person. I was so tightly scheduled with, 3 kids and all their activities, and it was on me to get them everywhere that I really had a very hard time with sudden changes in plans. And so that's definitely something I've worked on a lot.
Same.
And I understand from the parents' point, you got your 3 kids in the car, and all of a sudden, oh no, we're not going to that party.
Now what?
Now what? Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it. I used to host something called the Lobster Feast, and it was, a party right after Christmas, right after Thanksgiving, for I don't know, probably 30 people. And we used to, take it from house to house to house. And so it was going to be at our friend's house. And he called, he was like, hi, yeah, one of my little ones just threw up all over the place. So party's at your house. And so
Wow.
pivot on a dime.
Yeah.
I was going to have 30 people over. Let's go buy some juice boxes for those little guys.
But everybody will really they'll understand. Like we put it on
Yes.
ourselves. Oh my God! Now I got to host 30 people in
Yes.
an hour. The house is not clean. They're like, where'd that
Right. And
go?
nobody cares if your house is clean.
It's okay.
Right.
We
It
don't worry about
really,
that.
really is. And, and that's something that
It's
just
true.
take that off yourself. Just no need to worry about that.
And you just brought back a memory. When my kids were younger, I would have the trunk of junk. It wasn't a mess. There'd be a storage bin in there, and it would be frisbees, wiffle ball, plastic bat, all that stuff. Because when something changed, then it was like, all right, well, let's go to the park, let's go to the beach, and you're prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like you said before, in those situations where somebody says something to you, you're anticipating it. You're going to get triggered. It's going to kick in an emotion or whatever. Have
Mhm.
that canned response to just,
Yep. And
kind of send
that
it on.
is self-care.
Mm,
That is a very, very high form of self-care.
mm.
Same as having your, bin of toys.
Yeah,
That's a form of self-care. I used to have, a bag of art supplies.
sure.
That's a form of self-care. And so when you plan ahead, it's self-care. When you're in the instant, it's self-soothe. Because self-soothe, you're
Hmm.
preventing a reaction.
Interesting. All right. Now it's clear. It's
Yeah.
funny when I think of self-soothe, I also think of like a baby.
Yeah. Yep.
Like
Yep.
sucking
And think
thumbs,
about
self-soothing.
sucking a thumb, getting wrapped. Those are all ways to re-regulate a baby.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have to, after all this time, metaphysical world talking about self-care and everything else, I've never heard self-soothe, and it makes such perfect sense.
Yeah. I mean, we don't suck our thumbs, but it used to be one of the ways of self-soothe was to go out and have a smoke. I mean, that's not socially
Hmm.
acceptable now, but that is the equivalent of a baby sucking a thumb.
1000%. And even if you
Yeah.
didn't equate it to the sucking of the thumb, it is, somebody goes and does a smoke. That's what they're doing.
And they're taking a break, and it's a definitive break. And the expectation is when that cigarette's over, they come back in. But now that's all out the window because
Sure.
of a lot of health issues related to that.
Of course.
And so coming up with modern day ways of taking that break is just helpful to have in your back pocket.
Such a good talk today. And so
So much
timely,
fun.
especially with the holidays coming up and the anticipation of something, that you might experience in dealing with family, friends, parties, whatever. We didn't even get deep into the Reiki part of what you do. But it's
Yeah. And those are all ways of, if you are taking care of your physical, you are also taking care of your energetics.
Yep. And once you learn what energy does and how you can harness the power to give you self-care, it's big. And you do it virtually too, right?
Yes.
Yep.
I sure do.
I
Yep.
want to remind people before we go, your YouTube channel, was it Reiki to the Rescue?
Yeah, it's Red Boots Reiki, Reiki to the rescue. And I think there is a topic on all of these things that we just covered.
Fantastic. And the website is redbootsreiki.com. Andy,
That's
always
right.
great having you.
Thank you.
Really is.
Have
And
a great set of holidays.
you too. I don't know when we're going to talk again, but happy Thanksgiving. Let's get that one out of the way.
All right.
All right. And self-soothe, people. All right. We'll talk soon. Okay.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.